Hello everyone, my name is Ava Agudelo-Winter. I'm the National Technical Assistance Coordinator for the New Entry Sustainable Farming Project. Welcome to the National Incubator Farm Training Initiative webinar on transitioning farmers off the incubator. This is the sixth in a series of 6 webinars on how to operate a farm incubator program and is brought to you by the New Entry Sustainable Farming Project in Massachusetts. We've been operating our project since 1998 and we're very excited to be able to bring this information to you today. As always, we would like to thank our sponsors, the Cedar Tree Foundation and the Clinial Foundation, for making this event and the NIFTY program possible, as well as our program partners who are presenting today, the Intervale Center and the Agriculture and Land-Based Training Association, also known as ALBA. So, here's our agenda for the next hour and a half. We will start with a quick technology training, and then I'll talk for a couple minutes about NIFTY, and then we'll move into our presentations. First, Maggie Donan from the Intervale Center will discuss how the Intervale builds strong businesses with farmers. And following that, Jennifer Hashley from New Entry will discuss our land matching program. And finally, Chris Brown and Patricia Carrillo and Patricia Howe from ALBA will talk about ALBA's successes and challenges with transitioning new farmers. We'll have plenty of time for questions from you at the end of the presentations, and if you'd like to learn more, I'll also explain a variety of other ways that you can take advantage of the resources that NIFTY has to support your work. The slides and a recording of the webinar will be available on the NIFTY wiki by the end of the day today. You'll get a link to that, so you don't have to worry about writing everything down or reading all the slides as we go. You'll get the link for that recording in a follow-up email after the webinar. And now let's move on to the technology. We are using the GoToWebinar service to bring you this webinar. In case you're not familiar with the controls, here's a quick orientation. Your screen should look something like this. If your screen looks like this, your control panel is minimized. You'll want to access your control panel during the presentation, so if it is minimized, click the double arrow button at the top of the bar on the right side of your screen, and then click the same button to minimize it again. To keep the control panel visible at all times, you need to take an extra step, go to the View menu, and click Auto Hide the Control Panel to remove the check mark from the menu option. When you join the webinar, the audio mode will default to using your computer, mic, and speakers. If you would like to use your telephone instead, especially if you're having connection issues, select Use Telephone in the Audio section of the control panel and then follow the dial-in instructions. Do make sure to dial your audio PIN, which is unique to you. If you haven't done that yet and you are joining by phone, please do that now. The audio portion of the control panel shows some other useful information. Attendees are muted to help everyone hear the presenter. The control panel displays which presenter is speaking. Although you will be muted, you can interact with the panelists using the questions box. As I mentioned, we've set aside time to answer questions after the formal presentation, but you can ask your question at any time during the presentation. When you submit a question, please be as specific as possible, and it's helpful if you indicate which speaker you're addressing. Your submitted question appears in the questions log in gray, indicating that the organizers have received your question, though no one else on the webinar can see it. We may not have time to answer all the questions during the question and answer segment of the webinar. Some questions may be answered in the questions box, so keep an eye on that area. And after the webinar, we will post answers to questions that were not answered on the wiki. After you close out of the webinar, you'll be redirected to a very quick evaluation. Please do take a moment to fill this out. It's so vital that we have your input and feedback. And as I mentioned earlier, the link to the archived webinar will be sent in a follow-up email after you complete the survey. So that wraps up the housekeeping. Now I'm going to talk for a minute or two about the NIFTY program. I know many of you are familiar with this information already, so I will keep it very brief. The end of 2011, New Entry received funding to provide training and technical assistance to startup incubator projects across the country. You can see here our map of incubator projects that have sprung up in the recent past. There are now over 110 projects on this map. We get more every day, which you can find on our website and the wiki. Clicking on any of the buttons on the map does give you demographic information about each project and a link to their website. So if you can't find your project on this map or the information listed is incorrect, please do let me know so I can make sure it's up to date. Many of these projects have shared challenges, and New Entry and various other partners have come together to address the increasing requests for training and technical assistance around shared topics of interest. So we're almost finished with our webinar series. For those of you who are just finding us, all of our previous webinars are available online, so you can view them at any time. They're on the wiki, which the address for that is under online resources right on this slide. It says nifty.wikispaces.com. So far we've done webinars on project administration, curriculum development, marketing support, and site management. And this last webinar is on transitioning farmers off the training site, and then we're going to do a bonus webinar on Thursday, April 25th from 1 to 2 p.m. on federal and state advocacy for farm incubator projects related to the ongoing Farm Bill negotiations. We also offer a referral service for you to receive free one-on-one technical assistance from our project partners, ALBA, New Entry, the Intervale, the Minnesota Food Association, and the New American Sustainable Agriculture Project. So you can contact me directly for that. We've had great response to that so far. People are finding it very useful. As of now, NIFTY has provided over 40 hours of technical assistance to dozens of projects throughout the U.S. and Canada. We have a wiki, which is an online repository for documents, videos, photographs related to incubator farm operations and management. You will receive information in your evaluation follow-up email with a link to that resource, which you're also welcome to use to upload your own resources and share with everyone else. And we also have a listserv, which is just getting going, that you can sign up for by emailing me or indicating your interest on the follow-up survey. NIFTY is also creating a toolkit designed to help people starting up incubator projects and will include worksheets, templates, examples, and case studies. That will be available in September. And finally, we have a date set for our annual field school, which will be September 12th through 13th. At the Minnesota Food Association just outside Minneapolis. We'll have 2 days of workshops, networking, and a site visit where you'll get to see the MNFA up close and see how they run their operations. So do make sure to get on our mailing list to find out more about that event as we get closer, but for now, definitely save the date. It's going to be great. Again, these are our project partners. They're organizations who've been running incubator projects for a long time and getting numerous requests for technical assistance in one form or another for years, and they have a lot of expertise. They signed on as technical assistance providers for this initiative, and they also collaborate on creating these webinars, and along with you and your feedback, guide the direction of the NIFTY program and what we offer. As you can see, NIFTY is made up of leaders in the field of land-based beginning farmer training and support, and we all hope you'll take full advantage of the knowledge represented here. Great, so now I'm going to turn things over to Maggie Donen from the Intervale Center to talk about how they help farmers build businesses that are strong enough to transition off the incubator. Take it away, Maggie.
All right, thanks so much, Ava. So I'm Maggie Donen from the Intervale Center in Burlington, Vermont. So I'm going to talk about transitioning incubators out of the Intervale. You can move on to the first slide. So first, to just begin with an overview of our land use options. Incubator farmers can lease land with us for up to 5 years. So for the first 3 years that they're here, they get a subsidized fee on land use and the other fees that we charge. And then for the last 2 years, they pay what the mentor farmers pay. There are exceptions to this 5-year rule. It's not set in stone. If there's a farmer that we feel is adding a lot of value to being here, whether it's fertility management or they're just a great community member, then we do make exceptions. But at this point, we're trying to build successful businesses, help them transition off, and be able to welcome in new incubators. And this 5-year timeline is part of the conversation with the incubators from the beginning. So incubator farmers are clear about this timeline. This is not a permanent land access opportunity. It's an opportunity for them to grow their business. So we make sure that people are clear about that from the beginning. And yeah, like I said, it's not a permanent land access opportunity, but it's an opportunity to build a business with the support of the Intervale Center and also with the support of the other farmers. You can move on to the next slide. So I actually think there's a slide that's out of order here. If you move forward one more, and then we'll go back one. So what do farmers gain at the Intervale in order to aid in a successful transition? So we feel they gain close relationships, business planning support, they gain statewide partnerships, mentorship, land management experience, equipment training, and more. And those bullets are what I'm going to touch on in more detail today. So you could move back to the Growing Strong Businesses slide. So like I said, we don't have a specific program in place to work with farmers on transitioning out of the Intervale. It is something that they're clear about doing when they come here. But we are lucky enough to work with a small number of farmers each year. So our work can really be catered to the needs of each specific farmer. So our work on transition with each farm differs greatly. Our goal is not necessarily to walk the farmers step by step through gaining access to land out of the Intervale, but our goal is to give farmers the chance to build strong businesses here so that transition becomes much easier and they're in a much stronger place to be able to gain access to land. And so our hope is that once farmers are ready to make more long-term investments, like buying a piece of land, maybe with a home on it, buying equipment, hiring employees, they know that they have a successful business model in place and they've acquired many more skills. So we see a lot of farmers who go through the experience of purchasing land, starting their business, and realizing that maybe what they're interested specifically in doesn't have a place in the market in Vermont right now. Or maybe they realize that the lifestyle of being a farmer is actually not something that they want to do, even though they may have thought that they wanted to do it. But now they own this piece of land, they own all of this equipment, and they have to get out of it. So our hope is to give people the chance to try that sort of at low stakes, where they're renting year to year. So if they decide one year that they want to do it and then they realize that it's not for them and they're really unhappy, they can decide not to continue with their business for the next year. That being said, through our process of application, we do try to choose farmers who have experience and are prepared. So we don't want to set people up for failure, but we want to give them the opportunity to try their idea and see if it's something they really want to do. So now you can move forward 2 slides. So we really feel that it's all about relationships here, and you can see that the quote at the top of the page that says, "The most helpful was the support and the knowledge of the other farmers." So that's a quote we received from a former Intervale farmer who has now transitioned off. And that's something that I'm learning more and more as I spend time here, is that some of the most valuable things that the farmers express that they've gained by being at the Intervale Center is just their relationships with the other farmers. So you can sort of see these 3 different relationships that I'm talking about. And one is the Intervale Center's relationship with the farmers. So we're very well connected, the staff here. We are part of statewide groups. We get to know landowners all over the state. We get to know agricultural policymakers, people involved in many different aspects of agriculture. And so we get to know the farmers down here so well that we can really vouch for their character when they're applying for land. Or, we might be out in the community and we learn of a land access opportunity and we know our incubator farmers so well that we can really say, this is a great match for you. This is just what you're looking for. We can also really gain a great understanding from them as to what kind of land they're looking for. So, right from the beginning, we start talking to them about what kind of land they're looking for when they transition, knowing that they have this 5-year limit. So another kind of relationship that is really important is the farmers' relationships with one another. So like I touched on before, in interviews with graduates, one of the most valuable assets that many people say they gain is their relationship with other experienced farmers who farm here. So one example of how this benefits them is that those farmers will then go with the incubators to look at possible land and give them feedback. Or if the incubator farmers find land that they're going to transition onto permanently and they need to start purchasing equipment, some of the other more experienced farmers who are down here permanently or more permanently can go with them to look at tractors. So, those are the people that are sort of there beside them, offering them really valuable advice throughout this whole process. And then the other relationship is the Intervale Center's relationship with other organizations and land access programs. So we have a really good relationship with the Vermont Land Trust and their farmland access program, and they know that we prepare farmers for success, and therefore they like choosing Intervale graduates for their land. So they're familiar with our program. They know the caliber of farmers that move through here, and they realize the experience they gain. And so I think they feel strongly about, if they see on your resume or in your business plan that you are an Intervale farmer, that really speaks highly for you. So our relationship with not only the Vermont Land Trust, but other landowners in the state, and I think our reputation really helps the farmers. So you can move on to the next slide. So another aspect that farmers gain being at the Intervale is business planning experience. So again, we focus on individual business planning with each farm from the very beginning. Farmers have to submit a business plan to apply to have land here. So therefore, when farmers are ready to begin looking for land, maybe in year 3 or 4 or 5, they have a business plan to hand to a landowner, whether it be the Vermont Land Trust, a private landowner, or another type of organization that maybe they'll lease land from again. They're also more prepared to meet with a lender. They're familiar with their financials. They're familiar with business planning and sort of the lingo and the terminology that goes along with it. As I touched on before, by the 3rd or the 4th year, we begin to talk with farmers about what kind of infrastructure they might be looking for in a farm property. And this might be the kind of question that if they'd never really had experience and grown their business, they would have no clue, what kind of infrastructure they need, what kind of outbuildings they might need, what kind of soil they would need. So items that we encourage them to identify while they're here and while they begin the process of looking for land is acreage, soil, location, infrastructure. Do they want to continue renting or do they want to own? What's their savings? What's their credit like? What are their needs for a loan? And then some questions about production, financial management, marketing. So they're much more prepared to talk to a landowner about, where their business is going and where it's grown up until now. In addition, we have a program here called Success on Farms, and it's through the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, the Farm Viability Program. And if you've been in business for 3 years, and it's actually $15,000 in revenue, not 10, you can apply for the Success on Farms program and do a 2-year in-depth business planning process. And so farmers can utilize that service and think about their transition and the business changes that might be associated with that move. So you can move on to the next slide. So another aspect are these statewide partnerships that we have. So at the end of the incubator's 2nd year, Intervale staff encourage all farmers to begin having conversations with organizations like the Farm Service Agency about loans, Yankee Farm Credit, the Vermont Land Trust. And something that I didn't note in here but that's really important is, we're not holding these farmers' hands. I'm not going to set up a meeting for me and someone at the Land Trust and this farmer. They're adults and we trust that they can do these things themselves. And if we can sort of tell them the right person to contact and we can encourage them to get in touch with these certain organizations, but we're not the ones who are motivating them to do that. We really want it to be a self-motivated process, and we want these farmers to ensure their own success by their own actions. And we also really feel that the sooner that farmers can begin having relationships with these organizations and express their interest in gaining land, the more success they'll have. So, the Vermont Land Trust has a huge list of farmers who are seeking land. And if these farmers can get to know the Land Trust and form a relationship with them as soon as possible and sort of show them the value of their business and the success that they've had, then the Land Trust, I think, will be more likely to maybe choose them for one of their properties. And as I said before, the Intervale Center is well situated in the state, and we know people at these organizations. And so, if needed, we can provide some sort of introduction, but we really like to be fairly hands-off when it comes to those relationships. We encourage farmers to check land access databases that exist, and we also help get the word out for them. So I'm on various listservs and I'm at meetings all the time. So when I hear about land access opportunities, I can sort of send them their way, and I can sort of serve as a clearinghouse for, if they're out in the fields and they're not spending as much time at the computer or at meetings as I am, I can keep an ear open for opportunities. Next slide. So another aspect that we hear from graduates that's been really helpful is the mentorship piece of their time here. So when farmers get accepted into the incubator program, our farms program, we connect them with 1 or 2 mentor farms at the Intervale. So I've stated it in previous presentations, I believe, but we do have 2 levels of farmers. Mentor farmers were sort of grandfathered in to being able to be here as long as they want. They don't have this 5-year limit. They're not considered incubators anymore. They're considered mentors, but part of their responsibility is to provide assistance and guidance to some of the incubator farmers. So I help connect those relationships in the beginning. And, we try to find a good match between mentor farmers and incubator farmers, whether it's because they're doing a similar business or the type of people they are or their marketing outlets, a wide variety of ways that they could share similarities. So the mentor farmers have to provide 20 hours a year to an incubator farmer, and many graduates of the FARMS program comment that their mentor farmers became valuable resources during their transition. So, it's very similar to that close relationships piece and it all being about relationships, but, the mentor farmers are probably the closest relationship that you have here, and those are the people you can ask to come help you look at land or keep an ear out for you as well. And, so many of them have been in business for a much longer time than the incubators. They can also provide advice about transition. So as you can see, there's another quote here from one of our graduates. Other Intervale farmers came with us on equipment buying trips to give advice. That was really helpful. So I think those are the kinds of relationships and sort of assets that people gain here that you might not be able to get in another situation, and that we really feel aid in the successful transition of incubators. So you can move on to the next slide. So something else they gain is land management experience. So this quote, the fact that we had gotten a chance to learn about the equipment we needed and the techniques we wanted to use made the transition so much easier. So they get exposed to certain land use practices. So when farmers are leasing land from us, they have to abide by these practices. I spoke about them in the land management webinar. And this helps instill good practices in farmers for when they do transition. And it's something that they can express, and not only in their business plan, but also when they're speaking to a landowner that they might be leasing land from in the future or purchasing land from. They can talk about these skills they have to build better soil, manage the land responsibly, and show that they have these skills and that they learned about land management at the Intervale. So the other piece is equipment training. So farmers here have access to a wide range of equipment and training through IFEC, the Intervale Farmers Equipment Company. And so they get trained and they get practice using many different pieces of equipment. So when the farmer's ready to transition to a situation where they'll need to purchase their own equipment, they'll know what equipment is most valuable to them. So I think that got cut off, at least on my screen, but it's they'll know what equipment is essential for their business, is that last sentence. So instead of jumping into their business, not having any access, not having any experience using equipment, they now know here are the 2 tractors that are essential to my business, and these are what I use the most. And I know how to use them now, and I know what to look for when I'm buying them, and I can bring my mentor farmer with me to look at equipment to purchase and get their opinion. And so that is just a super valuable experience that they gain here that I think ensures that they don't go in the hole buying 5 different tractors because they don't know which one to use or which one they really need, in their first year. But they've had 5 years of experience. They know what their business relies on. They know where they're going and what they're going to need. So the next slide talks about flexibility. So that's another piece that we hear from graduates a lot. As you can see here, it says being able to farm while we looked for land, purchased land, and built a farm and house without losing any ground in our business was a big accomplishment that I'm really proud of. So farmers, many times that first year when you move from one piece of land to another, your production numbers are, sort of up in the air. You have no idea what your soil is going to produce. Many times your production numbers are a lot lower than you thought, so it can be hard to keep customers. And so by allowing farmers a somewhat flexible exit timeline, they can continue to grow their product here and maintain their customer base as they begin to understand their new soil. So for example, there's a farmer who's transitioning out of the Intervale now, and he's living on his land, and he's living on his new land, and he's cover cropping, he's soil testing, he's doing some experimental plots. He's getting to know the land, he's spending time there, but he's still able to have customers come down and pick up their produce from him here, and he's able to maintain that customer base until he feels comfortable with his production levels at his new land. So this is, I think, a huge piece, is that flexibility. So if, in the 3rd or the 4th year people start looking for land and maybe they find something, they have a year to to make that transition and ensure that they're going to be successful. So the next two slides are two examples of successful transitions that I just want to quickly cover, and I see, Ava, that I just have a few minutes left. So the first is Full Moon Farm. They're in Hinesburg, Vermont now. They began at the Intervale. They farmed here from 1998 to 2008. And they bought land actually in this county, which is one of the toughest places to find land in Vermont because of its proximity to Burlington. So they found it through the Vermont Land Trust. And they have a successful CSA, and farmers market sales was really what they built. They built out their business around those markets while they were here. And even though they moved 30 minutes outside of Burlington, they were still able to retain the same CSA customers and selling at the same farmers market. And now they continue to be successful. They're growing. They're more diverse. And they were really able to grow their business and their customer base here with relatively inexpensive land and access to equipment and access to a really booming market. And then the second example is Bella Farm, which is the next slide. She started farming here in 2009 and left in 2012, so she was just here for 3 years. And she found that the land she's now farming on through a friend who knew she was looking for a farm. Her mother actually purchased a farm for her, and then she grew her business here to the point where she was comfortable purchasing the farm from her mother and beginning to make those payments and knowing, you know, okay, I have a successful business model. I feel comfortable making this investment. And before she was able to leave the Intervale, she could clean out the barn on the new property, build a house, begin preparing the fields, and make legal arrangements with her mother to begin this eventual purchase of the farm. So there's that flexibility piece and some of that community piece that we really feel is important for transition farmers. So that's it. I hope that was useful. And as usual, if people have more specific questions, they can definitely contact me directly. My information is there, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Maggie. That was wonderful. Now, Jennifer Hashley from New Entry, our project director, is going to talk about how we do land matching with our incubator farmers and some other general information about how we do transitioning. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Great. Well, thank you. So I'm going to provide a little bit of an overview about our program and then how we transition farmers off the incubator, similar to what we just heard from Maggie. So next slide. So just a little bit of background about New Entry program goals. Similar to other incubators, our real interest is helping to remove the barriers to help new folks getting into farming succeed by providing access to a lot of different services and information like training and education, access to the land on the incubator or other farmland in the area, connections to capital markets, building their farming experience over time, and then as we heard about relationships being very important, also trying to intentionally reduce farmer isolation by building this network of other new farmers getting started in their business. So we kind of put together this Venn diagram of the three major components that we feel like we focus on significantly in our program: training and information, land access, and markets. And we work most intensively sort of at the intersection of all those when we're helping support producers who need a lot of support in all of those different areas. And our bigger goals are to help, obviously, sustain our local and regional food system, keep land and active ecologically sound production in the region, and preserve this knowledge for future generations so we have future food producers as we move forward. So next slide. So just a little bit of geography where we're located. We work throughout Massachusetts on several of our programs, but our land-based focus is at 2 incubator sites outside of Lowell in the Dracut area. And we also have our food hub in the Lowell area, and we're starting a new incubator site in the Newburyport area of Massachusetts. So we'll be managing 3 incubator sites this year plus our food hub. Next. So our audience that we serve is a very diverse range of growers from different ages, young people up to retirees, male and female alike, folks from different backgrounds and cultures, and folks that are interested in general. We serve people that on our incubator sites who are interested in vegetable production, but we also have a livestock training component. And we get people who range in experience from having farmed their whole lives from their home countries and bring that experience with them to folks who have are deciding to change careers and may have some business-oriented experience or not, but may not have much growing experience. And then in terms of our land matching program, we're also working with non-farming landowners to help them prepare to be ready to accept farmers on their properties. Next. So our incubator farm program is designed to allow farmers to get started on a small scale. We have a 3-year period where folks are eligible to use land on our incubator sites, and we provide a 1/4 acre of land in their first year of production. They have a prerequisite, which is to go through our farm business planning course and complete a vetted business plan, and then they're eligible to apply for a plot on our incubator sites. The incubator sites do come with a lot of the infrastructure that they may need. We provide the initial land preparation services, do the plot assignments. They have access to unheated hoop house, a greenhouse, storage sheds, rototillers, small farm equipment, and the like, and then it's really up to them to make the best use of their 1/4 acre plot. We also provide ongoing field-based trainings on the farms throughout the growing season and one-on-one technical assistance each week throughout their cycle on the farm. Next. So this is sort of how our overall program and services fit together. We get people interested in it through classes in structured learning. As I mentioned, the farm business planning course is a requirement. We also do livestock trainings and field-based trainings and some advanced workshops. But completing the business planning class with an approved business plan, it can't be something that someone just slaps together. It needs to have some thought behind it. It's vetted. We give people feedback and coaching throughout the business planning process so that their financials are realistic and their markets are also accessible. And then they're eligible for access to the training sites, the one-on-one technical assistance, and they can also participate in our World Peas Marketing Collaborative and Food Hub program to help build their direct market access. And then we also work with people through our farmland matching program that I'll describe shortly, whether they've come through the incubator program or they're just farmers in general who would like help accessing additional land for their operation. There isn't a prerequisite to access the land matching program. And then some of our other programs, we have a lending resource library in our office, and we operate a mobile poultry processing unit project for livestock producers. Next. So a lot of the things that Maggie mentioned are relevant in terms of how we prepare farmers to transition to their own sites as well. Again, knowing that they have sort of a 3-year timeline, the clock is ticking, we help people think about their transition period, starting as early as their 2nd year. We find that it does tend to take a while to match people with suitable land, so the earlier we can start getting folks ready to do that, the better. Usually in their very first season, especially if they haven't farmed before, it's overwhelming enough to be thinking about making sure they're following their crop plan and getting their crops to market in a timely way, that they're not quite thinking about transitioning yet in year 1. But after their first successful season, we're already starting to make sure people are starting to develop goals, continuing to update and revise their business plans annually, thinking about their farm management capacity, what infrastructure they're using on site. Are they wanting to move from a 1/4 acre their first year into maybe a 1/2 an acre or additional land in their 2nd and 3rd year? What infrastructure is available at the incubator sites to help with that, and their financial capacity. And all of those factors come into play as well as people are thinking about moving along after the 3-year period. So one of the things we do is, again, with that relationship piece, making connections for folks if they don't have as much financial capacity to make a transition outside the incubator sites, want to start connecting them to any microfinancing or credit opportunities through other partners, either that's USDA Farm Service Agency, small business development centers, other local nonprofits that are also offering microlending or microfinancing options for farmers in the area. We also, a really big important factor that we found that helps people think about transitioning to their own farms is continue to have good, strong market access, whether that's through their own markets they develop on their own or through our Food Hub and Collaborative World Peas, which can guarantee folks, whoops, did that slide just, yep, sorry, whether they can continue to sell to that as they grow their business. It certainly helps with the transition, knowing that they can continue to sell even after they move off the transition off the incubator sites. So just all of that to sum up to say that connecting them with continued learning and resource connections and all of those other components starting as soon as possible, because land matching can be a long process of making that transition and getting everything ready to move on. Next. So some of the challenges that we see a lot of when we're trying to help farmers transition off incubator sites and looking for other properties to farm on, depending on the background of the individual, if they're an immigrant or refugee, and language and literacy might be a challenge in advocating on their own, or cultural familiarity with towns. Some town politics are welcoming of people of different backgrounds, and we found that some communities or landowners may be less receptive to that. So for folks who can't advocate on their own, we end up doing a lot of that matchmaking for folks. Affordability can also be a challenge. Many of the farmers that we work with are very limited resource farmers and are relying on their farm income in addition to potentially other government benefits, so their capacity to invest in farmland in terms of ownership or expensive lease or rental arrangements can be limited. So we're always on the prowl for affordable sites. Thinking about if they're ready to scale up out of the incubator farms and want to grow on a larger acreage than we may have been able to provide on our sites, what does that look like in terms of their readiness for capitalization and infrastructure, regulatory compliance, continual market development if they're wanting to grow on larger acreage, insurance, and other issues. Some of our farmers also have challenges in terms of their willingness to enter into long-term contracts or leases if they're still not sure how long they're going to be able to enter into this, and many of the landowners on the other side are also, we've found, a lot of them like to start out on a trial basis for the first year, and then maybe they can enter into a multi-year agreement as time goes on. So one of the things that is a positive and a benefit about and a challenge about working on an incubator site in terms of folks getting experience, there's certainly the tragedy of the commons. People are sharing a lot of infrastructure, so as they're thinking about moving on to their new property, they've been using the types of equipment that we've had available, and whether or not they're paying attention to soil building, weed management is something we very much encourage, but having them continue to plan for the transition period, it's really important to think about what kinds of infrastructure is most valuable to them and how they're going to continue to build soil and manage weeds on their new properties as they move forward. Next. So a little bit about our farmland matching service and the mechanics of it. Again, we have really focused on this as a way to transition farmers because land is extremely expensive in Massachusetts, especially around the Boston area. There's a limited amount of farmland available on the market, and what there is may or may not be easily identified, and there's just a lot of need for new and expanding growers to be able to find those connections if they're not already connected to those opportunities in their own communities. And for landowners as well, again, that's one of our clientele. We get contacted a lot by landowners who know we're training beginning farmers. They're looking for someone to manage and farm their property. They obviously can get some tax advantages for keeping it and continuing it in agriculture. So we get folks requesting farmers to be connected to their properties frequently. Next. So how it works, the steps that are involved, there's different segments here. The boxes in blue are what we do to focus on outreach and information and education for landowners, and then the green boxes are what we do on behalf of the farmers. And just to make a quick point of reference, we are a very farmer-centered land matching program, so although we do try to engage with non-farming landowners or landowners, most of our work in that regard is finding suitable properties that are driven by farmer needs. So we are always looking to do educational information for landowners and outreach and trying to find those pieces of property. We'll also do a site visit and provide some technical assistance to both parties and able to make those connections and to make sure that the land is continued to be preserved and utilized. So next. So these are the different, again, elements of that. So in order to find and maintain a database of available land, we do targeted landowner outreach through a variety of methods. We have worked with towns to do mailings, mostly starting with their agricultural commissions in the community or their natural resource committees or conservation groups. We've also done some targeted GIS mapping projects where we've been able to look at available soils data, parcel data, look at wetlands, tree cover, other kinds of factors that might be important for land identification, and then overlaid that with town assessor data to try to find ownership information, and then have been able to do targeted mailings to properties of interest so that we can generate additional properties that may be beyond, you know, traditional public land or privately held land that's obvious. We've also hosted landowner education workshops because we want folks to be aware of the types of farming and the aesthetic that might bring if they're excited about bringing someone onto the land. And we try to do as much of that as possible remotely, but if we do find some promising properties, we may do a site visit with a landowner to see on the ground what's happening there. And then farmer outreach, usually again we're focused on folks that are coming and transitioning off the incubator, but we also do outreach to farmer audiences across the state who are looking for land and try to help them, educate them in terms of the available resources and things to consider when they're looking for land, and keeping our targeted communities up to date, and then also invite them along to site visits and things if we found a potential match. And then the matchmaking process happens, and then hopefully again we achieve our success in doing so. Next. So the outreach to farmers, I've kind of already gone through this, but really our incubator graduates are our primary audience, but other beginning farmers, conferences, events, word of mouth, internet, and newsletters and publications are other ways that farmers learn about the matchmaking program. Next. And then we have a pretty formal intake assessment and application form so we can gather information about the farmer enterprise, types of markets they have, location that they're particularly targeting, land type, size, any features, what their experience level is, and what kind of capacity they're bringing in terms of financial ability to make investments or infrastructure needs. And again, as Maggie pointed out, if folks are coming off of our incubator training sites and they've spent 3 years growing on our incubator farms, we have a pretty good analysis of what the farmer is capable of and can vouch for their character, but usually at that point they're also maybe looking to scale up, or they have learned a lot being in that 3-year period, and they may, you know, want to express some different needs as they're looking for land. So this is an opportunity to get all of that together in one place so we have a good profile of the farmer to share with a potential landowner. Next. And then we do our best to see if there's any existing matches that are, you know, immediately obvious right off the bat in our extensive farmland database that's available. And if we see something that might look potential, whether it's in the geographic community of the farmer or you know, meets all the other requirements the farmer has identified, we may contact a landowner and see if the property is still available, although we do update our database regularly, and schedule a site visit. And then if that goes well and it seems like there's a potential for a match, then we will definitely have subsequent matchmaking meetings between the farmer and the landowner and get them in the room and just discuss you know, expectations on both sides. Next. So again, this is just a little bit about reiterating how we identify land and landowners, conservation groups, ag commissions, land trusts, town land, a lot of word of mouth, and then doing our targeted search for landowners in a community through the assessor's data and other technology and mapping so that we can find suitable parcels. And then we've also hosted, as I said, educational forums for landowners and try to really be very frank about what may be required or the aesthetic. Again, if people are just used to seeing a large open field that may be hayed once or twice a year, it's a very different aesthetic to have a vegetable farmer come in and want to put up a hoop house and storage structure and till the land and be there every day harvesting, you know, having people coming, or they're going to have marketing on the site. So just really looking for those opportunities where it makes sense to make the matches. Next. And this is what I just was describing, the landowner information sessions. We've done targeted mailings again, inviting people to the info sessions, and then if people are interested in step up, follow up with calls or site visits, and then make the introduction process. And we really do try to get behind the motivations and build those relationships with the landowner and the farmer, because we are bringing them an opportunity to have their farmland farmed, and the farmer also wants to make sure that, you know, they're not going to enter into a situation with a non-farming landowner who's not fully prepared to make their property available, because there's nothing worse than getting someone all set up on a property and then having the landowner change their mind about making their property available. So we do the site visits and physical assessment. We also have a landowner intake assessment and application process to get to know more about their motivations and particular characteristics and past history of the property, and then figure out what their expectations and motivations are, and then move into the matchmaking process. Next. And then really this is where we kind of say, you know, the eBay meets eHarmony thing, where we work into the relationship building aspect of it and set up those meetings and facilitate the dialogue between the two parties. So we encourage folks, we bring example lease templates and worksheets. We have a couple of different resource guides that we can share with the non-farming landowners, and resource information for farmers as well, draft leases, and encourage everybody to express their preferences in terms of what they're looking for on their property. If the farmer wants X, Y, and Z, and the landowner wants, you know, A, B, and C, we need to make sure that that's a compatible match and that both parties can work together to make that happen. So we also, if they do want to formalize, which we highly encourage, a written lease agreement, we encourage both parties to have that reviewed by an attorney, because we do not pretend to be a legal advocate for either party on either side. We're just trying to make a successful relationship happen. And then we also check in as we move forward to make sure that the relationship is going well over time. Next. So there's a lot of ongoing support and follow-up that ends up being needed, as we found over the years after having transitioned dozens of farmers off of our sites. We do regular check-ins with the farmers on their new land and do follow-up site visits to their properties, making sure that their farming operation is continuing in the way that they had hoped, and providing any additional technical assistance that they might need. We found that some properties we've been able to match farmers to, you know, may not have adequate irrigation systems in place when they get there, so trying to help them troubleshoot that with technical assistance, or if they're looking to put up a hoop house on the property, making sure that they're working and getting all the permitting and other resource things and approval from the landowner and things that they need as they move forward. Next. So some of the characteristics we found of successful matches as we've transitioned farmers is, again, clear goals and expectations on both parties. Make sure that the properties and the farmers both have a compatible idea around their business and production plan, so everyone knows what to expect. Good communication, openness among the landowner and the farmer to really clearly communicate with each other, and honesty about their expectations. Some flexibility, and hopefully both parties have shared values around, you know, the goals of keeping farmland in active production, and the farmer can share the values in terms of the aesthetic or the types of production practices that the landowner is looking for. And we've just found that, you know, over time, you know, landowners who are really excited to have a farmer on their property end up bending over backwards to make it work for people, and we've had some good success. We've also had some challenging situations, and so I think the good communication up front and along the way and clear expectations is really key in making a successful match. Next. So some challenges and lessons learned. Again, the pre-screening is really critical, especially if it's someone we're working with that hasn't gone through our incubator farm program for many years. Really important, or even just to clarify with those incubator farmers, we may think we know what's in their head after working with them for 3 years, but you know, sometimes they may have different ideas. So doing that pre-screening and intake process, making sure everyone's expressing their needs and expectations for the land match, paying attention to the details is really important. Hearing what people are saying and reading into what people are saying and then clarifying that is also really important, and allowing adequate time to do the work of matchmaking. And there's nothing more frustrating than getting to the 11th hour, you know, a month before the growing season starts, and realizing that there was something that wasn't addressed that derails the whole process, and then you know, having a challenge of getting that farmer on the land that season. Personalities and motivations for making their land available really matter, and the personality among the farmer and their compatibility with the landowner are also really important. And we've just found that, you know, the matchmaking and finding a new farm for a farmer to transition to is just one step of the process, but there's a lot of other technical assistance that's needed once you know, limited resource farmers are on a new piece of property that may have limited infrastructure and may need to be capitalized with other types of equipment and resources that will help them grow their business, or even connect to some things as simple as how to get their new property plowed and harrowed for the growing season, because many of our farmers transitioning off the incubator don't already have that kind of equipment. So simple things like that can also provide extra resources that are needed. And we found that, unfortunately, with some growers, as I've said, if they're not locked into a multi-year lease agreement because it's the perfect property they found, if they're doing, you know, annual lease agreements year by year, we often get people who have transitioned to one site and then for one reason or another, either the landowner didn't want to continue to make their land available or it wasn't a good fit for the farmer. Oftentimes we've had farmers come back to us in their second or third year being off the incubator sites wanting to be matched with a new property. So we've had one example of a farmer who for the first 4 years off of the incubator site, every year she was on a different piece of property that we had to match her to. So it was just a matter of some being her preference, some being challenges with the land that she was on. So it's an ongoing process with some growers who continually need to find new properties after they transition. Next. So some of the other, just a little plug for our other statewide and regional farmland work. One of the things that we've been doing, because we found that as our farmers are leaving the incubator sites, they're not just looking at our immediate geographic area, but across the state and the region. So we've been able to host statewide meetings to kind of discuss farmland priorities and bring a lot of partners together to elevate the issues of trying to help beginning farmers get access to land in a very tight, expensive market. We've also done a lot of individual town-by-town mapping work. The example picture here is one of our GIS maps that we did in collaboration with the town of Groton near us. And that's been a real success in working with those communities and developing this resource for their agriculture and town planning commissions to identify those parcels that may be suitable for farming. And so other towns have jumped on board and asked us to help them with those kinds of mapping and assessment processes. And then we've done several community-based landowner outreach and education meetings with the help of local AgComs to bring people together and, again, just really educate folks about what this looks like in their communities. And one of the ways we'd hope to expand that in the future is to develop a regional farm-friendly neighbor campaign. With such urbanization and suburbanization around farmland communities, we get a lot of NIMBY, not in my backyard issues, and people not really understanding what it means to operate a farm. And so in our neck of the woods, that's a really important thing to just help raise awareness of what it means to support a farmer in your community. So our goal is to continue to increase farmland that's made available. So we have several parcels in our towns of interest where our farmers are looking for land. And there is now a regional, in New England at least, Farmland Finder listing service and other resources out of the Land for Goods Land Access project that we've been part of that we're also going to continue to support in the region so that it makes it easier for farmers to find land as they're transitioning off the sites. Next. So finally, just wanted to show again kind of how all of this fits together in terms of our program. You know, land matching is just one element of it, and in order to help farmers be successful on the incubator, it certainly also incorporates a lot of the other programs and services that we provide in the organization. All right, and I think that is it.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. So a lot of good information there. I just want to remind everyone that the slides and presentation, so all of that information will be available on our wiki by the end of the day today, so you can go check that out. And now we have Chris and the Patricias from ALBA, and I'm just going to make you all presenter for a minute real quick here. And then...
Hi, everyone. Let's see, here at ALBA, I'm going to take a slightly different focus. We're really going to focus on some of the challenges we're seeing. Let me put this on full screen. with the transition services. We, at this point, our transition services are not very extensive. Wait, can you see my screen, everybody?
No.
Okay. Now can you?
Yes.
Okay. They're relatively undeveloped, so I'm not going to focus on so much of what we do. I'm going to sort of focus on it from the farmer's perspective and what they're seeing and why we've had, we're having some issues and debate as to how far we go in terms of transitioning them. I've been here a year. Patty and Patricia have been here a combination of about 15, so they're going to add some color commentary in the background. So I'm kind of presenting things as I see them. And as I see them, we're kind of on hopefully the tail end of a 5-year period where there's been a lot of staff turnover and staff reduction, starting with the financial crisis. So I think transition, helping farmers to transition, is one of the areas in which has not been focused on so much. And now we're debating at the board level and among staff as to how far we should go in helping assure them that they get onto land and we provide ongoing services even after they've graduated. Over the last few years, we have not had the staff to provide these types of services. And I think the thinking has been, especially at the board level, is that we've been letting people stay here a fair amount of time, investing quite a few resources, and giving them sufficient time not only to learn farming, but also to be able to develop a network and find land on their own. So that's kind of where we are now. I'm going to describe some of the challenges they're facing and suggest a way forward, though it's even, as of now, subject to a strategic development process that we're undergoing this summer with the board. Okay? But the basics of ALBA are we've got 150 acres of organic land at 2 sites. We've got, as of this year now, 45 to 50 incubator farmers on our land. And they start our program by going through a 9-month educational program. We have about 30 students a year enter into that program. About 10 to 15 enter our incubator in the following year. Many of those decide to go back to their land, continue studying, use the credential to go get other work, but usually there's pretty high demand for at least 10 to 15 to stay in our incubator. They get a ½ acre of land the first year, and then they can scale up over 4 years to get up to 5 acres until we ask them to leave. Now, this is the new rule. In the past, as I'll talk about in a minute, it's been a little bit more lax. Okay? So talking about our experience so far in transitioning farmers, we're established about 12 years ago, and we've averaged probably about 25 new students annually. So we've had about 300 participants in our program. And that's 300 people who have entered our classroom program. Only about 75 of those, as of last year, had entered the incubator. Of those, 30 of these farmers are still farming on our land, and 10 of these have been here more than 5 years. And 3 of those have been here 8 years plus. We have 1 farmer who's been here since we were founded. So the level of urgency to actually transition off has not been extremely high. We've also acquired the second piece of land. It was 2002, I guess. And we've yet to fully occupy that land with program participants. In other words, some of the land is still being rented by commercial farmers who did not go through the ALBA program. So there hasn't been a real strong urgency for those to leave in the past. And that's sort of, I think, hurt or hindered the development of the transition services internally. Of the 45 farmers, 75 minus 30, who have left, we have not kept in very good contact with them. Some continue to do business through produce distribution. Some show up at our workshops. Some still speak at our graduations, which is great. But we don't have a systematic way to keep in touch with them. They're on our mailing list, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's a dialogue there. So we know 12 will continue to farm. We know another 12 or 13 have stopped farming. So in the remaining 20, we're just not sure because we don't have those so-called alumni services. So the conclusion is, even after 12 years, we've had relatively few graduates. And since there's little ongoing contact post-graduation and few services being provided, there's still questions remain about our program's effectiveness to prepare people for independence and transition them off and create long-term viable farmers. Okay. This is in terms of what they're facing out there. From a market perspective, from a regulatory perspective, I mean, this is, we're in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area food shed. Hugely lucrative market for organic produce, obviously, you know, pretty wealthy clientele, pretty socially aware, probably, I don't know what the percentage of organic produce is total in the Bay Area itself and how that compares to other places in the country, but I imagine it's pretty high. But that also means a lot of competition. Organic farming isn't just about small farmers. There's a lot of big players. Prices are coming down. You know, costs are coming down because of the efficiencies in the investments that some of the larger players are making. So it's a little bit more difficult on our farmers. There's also increased stringency from the regulatory agencies. CCOF, the organic certifying body, is cracking down. There's been reports of some cheating by some farmers, and this is creating, just as it should, more stringency on their part in terms of how they regulate organic production and distribution. And then there's limited marketing options for small farmers. We do have a food hub here, which has been very important for our farmers, but it creates a certain level of dependency because small farmers have difficulty both taking care of their farming, their compliance, and running a separate marketing operation through, say, CSAs or through farmers markets. Some are doing it, but it's a small minority. And the farmers markets have only so many spots, very difficult to get in them. So it creates a certain amount of dependence on ALBA. These last 2 points, land scarcity and obtaining finance. I have slides on. Land here is pretty amazing. The Salinas Valley is close to the coast, so a very temperate climate, and there are up to four growing seasons. You can get up to four cycles of crop if you do it right. And for that reason, for the reason that it's a very well-developed agricultural sector around here, rents are extremely high. We're surrounded by large conventional farmers. We have 100 acres here in Salinas, and we're an island of organic in the middle of it. And rents the market rents are well above $2,000 up to $3,000 per year per acre, and good berry land can cost up to $40,000 or more per acre. And there's plenty of commercial farms with deep pockets. Usually they're very well connected. They're pieces of land that come open, aren't advertised openly because they're usually snapped up by the larger commercial farms through word of mouth. So very difficult for our farmers to get a hold of and afford. Landlords who are renting land and can't find a renter, obviously they prefer the deep pockets. They prefer one relatively financially stable tenant over, say they have 100 acres. It would take 5 to 10 of our small farmers to be able to occupy that land. They would have to organize and approach that landowner, and it's a far less attractive arrangement, at least for the landowners around here, than finding one relatively liquid tenant. So they're more often than not relegated to the more marginal lands. There's a good number of foothills in the area, especially in northern Monterey County and San Benito and Santa Cruz County. But it's hilly. Soil quality is really variable. Even over on our Triple M Ranch, which is on quite a more marginal land, we recently rented out 4 acres to Florentino and his wife. And he said on his 4 acres, there's 3 different types of soil. It's really hard to get used to after farming in the Salinas Valley, which is where our main operation is. So it's kind of a rude awakening when they go off our land into the more marginal land. They don't get the productivity. There's more cost. It's more nuanced sort of technique that they have to get used to. Climate varies a lot too. Just over the hill in Hollister, much hotter. Only certain crops thrive there. Closer to the coast, it's too cold, too windy. Saltwater intrusion or salty sea air changes dynamics too. A lot of these marginal pieces have poor infrastructure or just far away from where they live. So the Salinas Valley is probably from the south from San Ardo up to Santa Cruz. It's probably 90, 100 miles. And you have to be able to find a piece of land, 5 to 10 acres, that's organic. You kind of have to stay flexible and may have to travel a good 40, 50 miles conservatively. There's also kind of some real estate spillover from Silicon Valley. From northern Monterey County, it's only about 70 miles away. You've got some professionals who are coming over, want to get back to nature, so to speak, live in a relatively more rural area. And they're the ones with land. And when farmers approach them, they look at the value of land from a real estate perspective, having no experience in agriculture. And they have some pretty outlandish expectations for what an acre of land should be leased at. So that makes it all the more difficult to come to an agreement. Finance is tough everywhere, I'm sure. We're talking about small borrowers. Agriculture is not particularly attractive to most banks. And here we're dealing with relatively beginning farmers. They may have 4 or 5 years experience when they leave. But many of our farmers are Latino immigrants, have limited English, limited formal education. They're still developing their business skills, very little collateral, and not a long track record. Increasingly, we're trying to get them to establish a business track record while they're in our incubator, so that by the time they leave, they've got something to show the banks. But we're dealing with some people who don't have bank accounts, who inconsistently do their taxes. Many leave the program without having serviced a loan, so they don't have that to show the banks. And record keeping is a big issue. We're trying to improve that as well. So all these sort of external factors really require us to prepare our farmers as well as possible. And we do have a great program here. In terms of the land we can provide, the length of time and service we can provide them, the level of expertise we now have on staff. It's all very good. But again, I told you I'm going to focus on the challenges that we're kind of dealing with now after having gone through this period of relative austerity and turnover. Some of the aspects of our culture and program structure are not ideally conducive to successful transition. For instance, in our program structure currently, this is I'd say we're kind of in the process of transitioning to running a tighter ship here. But right now, we enter people into the first year into our PEPA course. It's a 9-month educational course, which is half classroom, half field, practical experience in the field. And there's a lot of information that's hitting these very beginning farmers. And up until now, after the first year in the incubator, we have not reinforced that through ongoing education requirements. Those have been quite minimal. So you get a lot the first year, but since you can't apply it immediately, probably a good amount is not retained, and then we're not reinforcing it through ongoing education. Well, we're going to change that. Technical assistance, we went for a couple years without a designated farm incubator manager whose sole job is to work with farmers in the field. We had someone doing that, but he was also running the education course at the same time and couldn't provide adequate assistance. And because there wasn't that person out in the field too, there was a fairly lax enforcement of some of the basic farm rules. kids running around, speeding, weed control, all that stuff got a little bit lax, and people kind of were on their own to take care of that, and it was done relatively inconsistently. We also had a fair number of farmers here which weren't showing up very often, were not, taking care of their land very well, and there weren't consequences for that. So that's something that we're going to tighten up. Once you got in, basically, you're going to stay in until you wanted to leave, more or less. We had some time requirements, but oftentimes if a farmer, particularly those that were relatively good and skilled, if they wanted to stay, we found room for them. And I mean, this was especially true since, a fair amount of our land was being rented out by commercial farmers. So, if somebody wanted to stay, we would more likely to ask the commercial farmers to leave than one of our program farmers. And then, as I talked about with our alumni services or transition services, we just didn't have the personnel for a while to be able to really get out there and provide a service. Basically, what our previous presentation and Intervale talked about. Really have designated services to go out there and network with landowners and do matchmaking, which is fairly time consuming. And this is something we're kind of at the cusp of starting to do, but the debate still rages as to how far we go. And so I put out of sight, out of mind in terms of limited alumni services. That's an exaggeration because we continue to keep, inform them of events here, hold events that are open to alumni, send them newsletters, and the squeaky wheels, of course, got some assistance, the ones who spoke up and asked us for them. But for the most part, we continue to market the produce too, those that want to. But I wouldn't say that there was a very strong dialogue, and there weren't any systematic like alumni development services or transition services. Okay. One last thing too, there's a very active nonprofit community in the Monterey County area, and there are lots of conferences, lots of advocacy efforts, lots of networking opportunities. Basically, we're one of the cradles, if not the cradle, of the organic movement. So there's a lot going on here, and it was the board's opinion that we're perhaps too involved in that. Our management attention was going towards networking, going towards publicity, going towards fundraising events, and not enough attention was going toward the farmers. And they made that very clear when I started, that that's where the attention should be. So we're really kind of getting back to basics and focusing our attention on the Alba farmers and their long-term viability. So the result of sort of these factors, our internal culture and program structure, has been, if our goal is to take, largely former farm workers and make them farm operators and teach them how to operate within the market environment here, I'd say we're more running on the insular side. Rather than exposing them and connecting them with the outside environment, we, because of our maybe inadequate oversight on the farm level, we're more kind of creating an internal culture here that perpetuated some of the maybe less market-oriented behaviors. People being lax on making payments on their contracts, on being late in signing new contracts, just kind of squatting on our land and things like that. Things that we can be relatively casual about because we are here for the farmers, but at the same time, by being too lax, we're not doing them any favors because this is not how the real world works, and that's what we're trying to prepare them for. It also created sort of a contentious environment. People were very, farmers were very, personally competitive, and because of kind of the lack of oversight, people, there are some small problems with theft and with borrowing equipment and things like that, that created an environment here where there wasn't, I think, perceived mutual respect. So that's something we're really working on too. And so in the end, because the program wasn't particularly time-bound and there are these features of the culture, once 4, 5, 6 years rolls around, there's very little desire to leave. This is a place where they get subsidized land, they get they get access to equipment, they get free technical assistance, and there wasn't any urgency. They're seeing other people stay for indefinite periods of time. People really set up shop around here and got cozy, which is not really what we're trying to do. This is we're trying to communicate to them that you have a limited time here, and get ready for independence, because that's where you're going to be in a few years. So, in terms of the way forward and how we're trying to change things now is, first of all, changing the mentality of the program and showing people that, yes, there is a definite limit of time here. We've asked those that have the longest tenure to leave, and we're really communicating time and time again as people come into my office and ask for one more year, ask for a little bit of land, or ask for this or that privilege, that there really there are rules here in a very temporary period of time to be here, and that time is a privilege, and you have to meet certain performance standards and standards of conduct to be able to stay. And we try to reinforce this message this year by reducing land of some people, by asking people to leave, by bringing people in if there's been repeated reports of their conduct, and so on. We try to make it very clear that their continuation, it's not their right to stay for, say, 4 years or 5 years. It really depends on land availability, and it depends on their performance. They have to commit the time. We've gotten into, even yesterday, an extended debate with one farmer who's been here for 4 years about the amount of time that she is really devoting to her business and whether or not she's truly devoted. And we had to cut her back to 1 acre from 2.5 acres because of that. And that sends a message to the other farmers too, who've actually, many of whom have actually complained about the state of her field.
Chris?
What I'd also like to do here is establish
Chris?
a path. Yes.
We've only got about 12 minutes left for the rest of the webinar, including questions, so I have to ask you
This will take like 2 more minutes.
Okay, great.
This is the last slide. Establishing a pathway to success. As I mentioned before, we just kind of had PEPA in the incubator, this intensive course. Then you're kind of in the incubator. Yeah, you get a little bit of technical assistance here and there, but there's not a whole lot of structure during that 4 or 5 years. And so what we're in the process of doing now is setting compliance standards and performance standards year by year. So their continuation and the amount of land they get and the terms of their ongoing tenancy are going to depend on hitting these milestones. And finally, the question mark about transition alumni services. The debate at the board level is, one camp says we're more like a school. You're here for a set period of time, you graduate, and it's bye-bye. We'll send you a letter every so often, but we just don't have the resources to provide ongoing services. You got to go out there and fend for yourself. The other camp at the board level is saying that, hey, it's a very difficult environment out there. This is not like school where there's a whole sort of workforce and corporate structure to absorb these newly skilled farmers. We really have to provide those services to make them viable. I tend toward that camp, and obviously, I mean, the whole premise of this presentation or discussion today agrees with that as well. Very difficult to find land, very difficult to find financing, particularly for those farmers who have a more disadvantaged profile. The question still remains, how far do we go? Based on what I saw from the previous conversations, I don't know if we're going to be able to go that far, at least not in our current budget. But at the very least, we are going to have to actively network with landowners, use partners like California FarmLink, whose service it is to do matchmaking and provide finance to small farmers, and provide more ongoing education and technical assistance. And frankly, there's a huge opportunity, I think, in staying tapped in with our alumni network. I mean, these are the mentors. These are the ones who provide a pathway for our graduate farmers and what it's like out there, and have a unique perspective that even Alba would have a difficult time providing. So, and I think there's business opportunities there as well. So it would behoove us to really stay in touch and cultivate that alumni network toward providing better services. Okay. I hope this, going through this and contrasting it now with the other presentations, I hope this wasn't too focused on on the challenges and kind of the negative. But frankly, I just, we're not there yet when it comes to transition. We haven't transitioned successfully tons of farmers. We haven't developed very strong services. And I think it's important to share it's more interesting and probably more useful to the audience to talk about the challenges that we are facing right now.
Great, thanks, Chris. That was good to have that perspective, and we have seen some of the challenges and also some of the solutions in this presentation, which I think is great. And I just want to remind everybody that if you would like to reach out to any of these organizations to learn more in depth from them individually, so New Entry or the Intervale or ALBA, discuss your program's own unique challenges with the folks who have spoken today, and do some problem solving around some of this stuff, you can get in touch with me directly to receive one-on-one technical assistance from any of our nifty project partners. As you can see up on the screen, there's some more information about other ways to be involved. We have one more webinar coming up at the end of April. I'm also very interested in hearing from other folks about if they'd like to go deeper into some of the topics that have happened over the last 6 webinar series sessions. You can give me some feedback either on the evaluation form or email me directly. And now we do have some questions, so let's move on to those. First of all, could people just recap quickly, and this is a tough question to answer, I know, but how many graduates are currently farming off the incubator sites?
This is Jennifer. For our New Entry farmers, I think our latest figure that we have is we've transitioned 18 farmers off of the incubator site over time. And one thing I just wanted to say, because I realized I didn't really clarify very well why we choose a 3-year limit. I know that Intervale said 5 years and ALBA said they're flexible. We chose 3 years originally as our kind of incubator time frame because, first of all, our land base here in eastern Massachusetts is extremely limited. We only have about 8 acres available to lease to farmers, so at a 1/4 acre apiece we can fit a lot of farmers on, but we also want to model good soil management practices through adequate rotation and cover cropping, so we want to leave some of that land fallow and not pack it full of individuals. It's also extremely expensive to run an incubator farm project, and so we need to just make sure we can continue to cycle people in. And we also felt that 3 years was an adequate amount of time for folks to do adequate record keeping and build their business to establish a production history. 3 years is generally what Farm Service Agency requires to establish eligibility for some of their programs. So that's kind of where that number came from, if anyone was also curious. I don't know if that was another question, but wanted to fit that in.
This is Maggie from the Intervale. Off the top of my head right now, just in that last minute, as Jennifer was talking, I thought of 8 farms that we know of right now who are farming on their own off of the Intervale. A couple of them are out of state, and a few of them have been, sort of changed their businesses or the structure. But I want to just quickly speak to Chris's presentation. I think that transition continues to be something that we struggle with at the Intervale, and we do hear from farmers that they really need support during that time, and it's really difficult. And so, as much as I spoke to a lot of the positive aspects that they gain here, I think we're continuing to figure out, the most supportive role that we can have without sort of enabling farmers and doing things for them, but at the same time, getting them access to land. We have a similar situation where land here is expensive. It's really hard to get, and it's definitely a really big challenge. I don't feel comfortable with every single farmer coming in here saying, oh, I know you're going to be able to find the perfect piece of land in a place where you're going to have access to booming markets. It's really tough, and I think that Chris's presentation had a ton of value, and I think it's a conversation that I hope we can all continue to have, because I know we are trying to get better at it. So,
Maggie, that brings up a really great point, and I'd like you to speak. I know that you work really closely with the Vermont Farm Viability Enhancement Project, and they are sort of, there's some outsourcing of the business planning and the financial planning, and I wonder if you first and then everyone could speak to the partnerships that we as incubators have with outside organizations that perhaps have specialties that we don't, particularly around financial management and things like accounting.
Yeah, so part of that relationships piece that I spoke to relates to this really directly. I think that what a lot of farmers would say who are down here and are mentor farmers, and some of the most successful farmers who have left would say that what they got from being here was not necessarily that, like, our staff internally had all of those skill sets around accounting and legal advice and taxes, but that we had access to the best people in other organizations who could do that. So, yeah, we work very closely with Farm Viability. We have a staff member here who does full-time business planning, so we have that expertise in-house. If the work that I do with them one-on-one reaches a point where I no longer, have the level of knowledge that they might need. And like I said, we work really closely with the Vermont Land Trust Farmland Access Program, which works to get farmers with really strong business plans onto land at agricultural values, so at a lower price, so that they do land conservation. I don't know, we have a ton of statewide partners, so I don't want to take too much time in speaking to them, but I think that piece of just getting farmers in touch, within their first few years with good agricultural accountants that we know and good lawyers that we know of, and helping a little bit with some of the funding in the beginning. We do have some technical assistance money available through a different statewide business planning for new farmers program that we have. So we can, provide those connections from the beginning, and then those people will continue to have those relationships throughout their transition. So. But that is a piece that we hear from our transitioning farmers, that the financials are part of the the financial projections in that transition period are so essential, and having somebody to help them do that, to know, like, okay, really what am I going to be grossing if I make this change, and what can I project that's realistic. Is something that we really try to encourage people to do, and we can help them do if they need that help.
Great, thanks, Maggie. Anyone else want to speak to that?
This is Jennifer from New Entry. I would also say we try to the extent that we can to do as much of that ongoing technical assistance in-house as possible, and I think one of the ways that we've been fairly successful in providing some of the support to our transitioning farmers is through continued access to our food hub and the collaborative marketing channel that we also provide, similar to what ALBA does as well. And although some may say, well, maybe is that creating a culture of dependency, as we're continuing to try to grow the food hub, we're always wishing and hoping that the farmers want to expand their production and scale up, and by helping them transition off the incubator sites, which are land limited, they're in a much better position to be able to grow more for this market and expand their other markets. And so through that process of crop bidding and looking at their financials and their crop projections and what they can produce in their production planning and expansion plans, I feel like we end up doing a lot of that financial planning in-house with them to enable them to understand what it's going to take to scale up for that market in the future. And I also think that that is one of the keys to success. I think if we didn't provide that in-house marketing support as clearly as we do for people when it came time for the 3 years, if they were struggling with their own markets or having to be unsure as they're moving off the land, it may be a big factor in people moving away from it or giving up. And I find that it's really encouraged people to want to work hard to make that transition and continue to grow their businesses because they know they have that built-in market component.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. We've got one more question. So to what extent is our clientele hobby farmers versus folks who have the real desire to be net income farmers? And I think Maggie's presentation spoke to that a little bit when you were saying you want folks to be able to have an opportunity to find out that question, actually, like whether they are or they're not. But if anybody else wants to give that one a try.
I think this is Chris. I think upon entry into our program, a lot of them don't know yet just how serious farmers they are. Our program definitely is more oriented toward net income farmers, as you put it, people who are really trying to make a go at this as a living, and those who demonstrate their commitment to it and their ability are the ones who stay longer and get more land. I'm not saying we don't have any hobby farmers after, say, the first or second year, but they're going to probably stay more on like the 1 acre level and probably won't be given as long a tenure here. That's basically how we approach it.
And I would say from New Entry's perspective, we make it really clear, like I said, we have a bunch of prerequisites for people before they get on the incubator farms, that this is a commercial venture. Our goal is for folks to have a net income from this. It may be small, it may be supplemental, it may not be their full-time, it probably likely is not their full-time work, but it should be generating positive cash flow for them if they've set up their business plan appropriately and they have really good, strong markets, which we're fortunate to be very close to here in the greater Boston area. So we discourage people from looking at this as a hobby opportunity, but I do think, to Chris's point, people need to figure this out for themselves. We can hammer business planning down people's throats as much as we want and make it a requirement, and people will realize that maybe this isn't a commercial venture for them, and then they transition off and move on and continue to farm on a hobby scale elsewhere. But for folks who stick around on our incubator sites, it should be very much a commercial venture.
Yeah,
Great, thanks.
Sorry.
I just want to wrap it up. Sorry, Maggie, but again, folks can get in touch with me if you want to talk more to these partners about their experiences with these things. And I hope you join us for our next webinar on April 27th. And thanks so much for joining us this time.
Thanks.
Thank you.